"What the hell is this, Jessica? Are you spying on me now?" Richard slammed his phone on the kitchen counter, his face flushed with fury. "I was just checking our accounts," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The retirement fund is practically empty. 30 years of savings, gone," he scoffed. "You haven't worked in 20 years. That money is mine. My career, my sacrifices." The words hit harder than any slap. "We agreed I'd stay home for the kids," I reminded him, my voice shaking. He ran a hand through his graying hair and muttered, "If you can't trust me, maybe we shouldn't be married." Then he stormed upstairs, packed a bag, and walked out without another word. "My name is Jessica Weber. I'm 52 years old. I gave up my career for our family and he repaid me by draining our future for his mistress. Stay with me to see how I turned his betrayal into the boldest move of my life." We met in college. Richard was the ambitious business major, always dressed for his future, and I was the criminal justice student with dreams of law school. He was charismatic, sharp, and always one step ahead in class discussions. I admired his confidence. He admired my drive. We fell in love fast and married just after graduation. Our plan was simple. He'd pursue finance, and I'd go to law school within a year or two. But when Olivia came along 3 years later, everything changed. We made the decision together. I would stay home, just for a little while, until Olivia started school. Then Thomas was born, 2 years later, and Zoe followed 2 more years after that. I never returned to law school, but I didn't regret it. I poured myself into motherhood, organizing school schedules, supporting every milestone. I was there for scraped knees, science projects, and college applications. Meanwhile, Richard's career at Midwest Financial took off. I was proud of him. He worked hard, and I made sure our home life was strong so he could focus. We were a team, at least, that's what I thought. While he climbed the corporate ladder, I became the silent partner in our marriage. He made the money, and I managed everything else. We built a life together, a comfortable future. But over the past year, things started to shift. Richard worked later. Business trips increased. He grew distant and irritable. He guarded his phone like it held state secrets. I noticed new cologne on his shirts and dinner charges on the credit card from nights he claimed to be in meetings. I mentioned it once, just once, and he snapped, accusing me of paranoia. I began to question myself. Was I being too suspicious? Had I spent so long managing the household that I'd forgotten what corporate life looked like? I didn't want to be the jealous wife. I didn't want to ruin our marriage over what might be nothing. I told myself to trust him, to believe in the man I'd spent nearly 3 decades beside. Then came the Tiffany bracelet. I found the receipt in his suit pocket while doing laundry. When I asked about it, he said it was a retirement gift for his assistant, Patricia. But when I called his office the next day, pretending to confirm a lunch meeting, I learned Patricia had left the company over a year ago. Still, I hesitated. I told myself there had to be an explanation. I didn't want to believe the man I loved could lie so easily. But as I dug deeper into our accounts and saw the $487,000, 0 cents, missing from my retirement fund, it became impossible to deny. The trust I'd clung to for so long, shattered. This wasn't just distance. It wasn't just emotional neglect. This was deception, deliberate, calculated, cruel. And I was done pretending it was anything less. At first, it was small things, charges on our credit card that didn't line up with Richard's explanations. A fancy dinner downtown on a night he claimed to be stuck in late meetings. A hotel charge in Chicago, even though he swore he had flown to Minneapolis for a conference. Then, the receipt for a woman's bracelet from Tiffany's tucked into his suit pocket. He said it was for his assistant's retirement, but when I called the office to confirm feigning plans for a surprise lunch, the receptionist casually mentioned that Patricia had retired over a year ago. I felt something inside me shift. Then came the breaking point. A notification popped up on my phone from Instagram, even though I barely used social media. Someone had tagged me in a post. Curious and confused, I opened the app and stared, frozen. The photo showed Richard on a beach, smiling, his arm wrapped around a young blonde woman in a designer bikini. He raised a protective hand to his mouth. "Sorry, not sorry, Jessica. He's mine now." The account belonged to someone named Diana Blackwell. I clicked through, heart pounding. There were more photos. Richard and Diana shopping, dining in upscale restaurants, lounging on what looked like a private yacht. In each image, Richard looked completely relaxed, carefree in a way I hadn't seen in years. And then came the direct message. Diana had sent a screenshot of our shared bank statement. Bold red ink circled the account balance. $3,287, 0 cents. A caption scribbled across the image read, "Thanks for funding our new life." The final message? "He says you'll take him back. You always do. Pathetic." I ran to the bathroom and threw up. My stomach turned inside out from rage, humiliation, and shock. I clung to the edge of the sink, trying to catch my breath, trying to stop the room from spinning. I couldn't believe this was real. Couldn't believe the man I had built a life with for 27 years had not only cheated, but flaunted it so publicly. He hadn't just walked away, he had stolen our future and handed it to someone half his age, with no shame at all. And as I sat on the cold bathroom tile, shaking, something in me clicked. This wasn't just betrayal. This was theft. This was a financial crime. I wasn't just a heartbroken wife. I was the victim of calculated fraud, and I wasn't going to be silent about it. I wiped my face, stood up, and walked back to the kitchen. I laid out every bank statement, credit card receipt, and investment report I could find. The pieces were there. I just had to put them together. Richard thought I would fall apart. But I had spent nearly 3 decades managing a household, balancing finances, and raising 3 smart, strong children. I had let myself believe I was powerless. I wasn't. And now, I was ready to prove just how wrong he was. I picked up my phone and called the only person I knew who had been through something remotely similar. My friend Valerie. Her divorce 3 years ago had been brutal, but she came out stronger on the other side. I remembered her praising her attorney, a woman named Catherine Wilson, who specialized in high-conflict divorces involving financial misconduct. Catherine answered on the second ring. Her voice was calm, professional, and immediately reassuring. I explained everything: Richard's disappearance, the missing retirement funds, the photos, the messages from Diana. By the time I finished, my hands were trembling again. "I've seen this before," she said firmly. "We need to move fast." Within 24 hours, I was sitting in Catherine's sleek office high above downtown Chicago. She reviewed the financial documents I'd brought and the screenshots I'd taken of Richard Diana's online posts. She tapped her pen against her legal pad thoughtfully. Financial infidelity combined with actual infidelity. The court takes this seriously, especially when there's misappropriation of marital funds. First, we file for divorce. Then, we request an emergency motion to freeze all financial accounts. You'll also need a forensic accountant. I work closely with one I trust. My head spun. It felt like I was tumbling headfirst into a world I barely understood, but Catherine's calm confidence gave me strength. "Document everything," she advised. "Every call, every message, every transaction, and keep it backed up." Later that evening, I called my daughter Olivia. She was in her final year of medical school, always busy, but when she heard the shake in my voice, she stopped everything. "Mom, I'll come home. You shouldn't deal with this alone." "No," I said, though the thought of her presence was comforting. "I need you to stay focused. But I could use your brain. I need help organizing the documents." She dove in immediately. We shared files over cloud storage, and within hours, she had built a spreadsheet mapping every transaction tied to Richard's secret accounts. She even started researching legal precedents and penalties for financial fraud in divorce proceedings. "I don't understand how he thought he could get away with this," she said late that night. "Because he thought I wouldn't fight back," I replied. By the end of the week, Catherine's emergency motion had been filed and approved. A temporary freeze was placed on all joint accounts. The forensic accountant, a meticulous man named John Patterson, began tracing where every dollar had gone. And Olivia, my brilliant, determined daughter, became my right hand in this fight. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was building a case. Richard and Diana may have thought they were playing a game I didn't know how to win. But they had underestimated the wrong woman, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to hope. The day Richard returned, the air in the house was tense with anticipation. Olivia had flown in that morning. Thomas and Zoe arrived by noon, having coordinated their travel to be there for the confrontation. We had agreed they would wait upstairs until the moment was right. I wanted the first interaction to be between Richard and me. Elise Rodriguez, Catherine's associate, sat quietly beside me at the dining table, her folder of documents ready. At exactly 2:04 p.m., the front door opened. Richard stepped in with his usual swagger, suitcase in one hand and a practiced smile on his face. "Jessica," he said, almost cheerfully, "I'm glad we're finally doing this. I think we both just needed some space." I remained seated. "We do need to talk," I replied evenly. His eyes flicked to Elise. "Who's this?" "This is Elise Rodriguez from Wilson Family Law. She's here on my behalf." Richard's smile faltered. "You got a lawyer? That's completely unnecessary." "What's unnecessary?" I said slowly. "Is transferring nearly $500,000 out of our retirement account without telling me. Creating an LLC in Wyoming to hide it. Giving our future away to a woman named Diana Blackwell, who's been kind enough to document your relationship on Instagram." Richard's face drained of color. "You went through my financial records." "They're not just your records, Richard. They're marital assets, and I have every right to know how you've been spending our life savings." Elise slid the divorce petition across the table. "Mr. Weber, consider yourself served. The court has granted an emergency motion to freeze all joint accounts and prohibit asset transfers." He looked stunned, then angry. "You can't do this. You don't even work. You wouldn't know where to begin without me." Before I could respond, Olivia stepped into the room, followed by Thomas and Zoe. "You've been doing just fine without him, Mom," Olivia said, her voice steady. Richard turned, genuinely startled. "What are you all doing here?" Thomas answered, his arms crossed. "Supporting our mother? And watching you answer for what you've done." Zoe was trembling with emotion. "I saw those posts months ago, Dad. I convinced myself it wasn't you, but now I know the truth." "You turned our kids against me," Richard snapped at me, his voice rising. "That's cruel." "I didn't turn them against you," I replied. "You did that yourself. With every lie, every stolen dollar, every insult, disguised as indifference." Bees calmly opened the folder and laid out bank statements, wire transfer receipts, and screenshots of Diana's taunting messages, including the one where she held up a bank statement with the caption thanking me for funding their new life. "You systematically drained our retirement," I said, voice unwavering. "And you did it, thinking I wouldn't notice, thinking I wouldn't fight." Richard's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and stiffened. I knew it was from Diana, probably asking when he'd return with more cash or his golf clubs. "You need to leave," I said firmly. "You can take your clothes and toiletries. Nothing else leaves this house until we complete a full legal accounting." "You'll regret this," he snapped. "I've got connections. I'll bury you in legal fees." Elise stood. "With all due respect, Mr. Weber, you're the one who should be worried." Richard looked at each of us again, me, Olivia, Thomas, and Zoe. He saw clearly, maybe for the first time, that he wasn't walking back into a home. He was walking into a reckoning. And it had only just begun. 3 weeks after Richard had been served, we met again, this time in a downtown Chicago high-rise, inside Catherine Wilson's law office. The conference room had sweeping views of the lake, but all eyes were on the long mahogany table where I sat flanked by my legal team. Catherine was at the head, calm and sharp as ever. Beside her sat Elise Rodriguez, and across from us, Richard sat with his attorney. a man noticeably younger and far less experienced than the high-end pay lawyer he'd promised to unleash on me. His posture was defensive, arms crossed, jaw set. Catherine opened the meeting with formal introductions. Then, she leaned forward, lacing her fingers together. Let's begin with financial transparency. Jessica has submitted her full disclosures. We're waiting on yours, Mr. Weber. Richard's attorney cleared his throat. My client contends that the funds in question were used for investment purposes, including the creation of an LLC for business ventures unrelated to the marriage. Catherine arched a brow and slid a folder across the table. You're referring to the LLC registered in Wyoming, Silver Arrow Holdings. We've traced nearly $200,000 from joint accounts into it. And the beneficiary? Ms. Diana Blackwell. Richard shifted in his chair. That's not entirely accurate. The LLC was meant to protect future investments. Then why was it used to pay for international travel, luxury purchases, and a private yacht in Bora Bora? Elise asked coolly. We have documentation showing those expenses, right down to the custom bracelet purchased at Tiffany. Richard looked to his attorney, who appeared visibly rattled. Catherine tapped her pen on the table. We're also in possession of screenshots of text messages between your client and Ms. Blackwell discussing the deliberate siphoning of marital assets. Your client wrote, and I quote, "Once the accounts are clear, we disappear. She won't fight. She doesn't have it in her." My heart clenched at those words, but I didn't flinch. I remained still, poised and silent, the way Catherine had advised. Control the room with your presence. Don't let him see you shaken. Richard's attorney opened the folder, reading the copies carefully. He paled. That's not admissible, Richard said quickly. Those messages were private, illegally obtained. Actually, Catherine replied evenly, they were submitted voluntarily by Ms. Blackwell. Once she was informed she could face criminal charges for knowingly receiving misappropriated marital funds, she decided to cooperate. She turned over her phone, emails, and account statements. The silence in the room was deafening. She betrayed me, Richard muttered, staring at the table. She protected herself, I corrected. You two were never a team. She was in it for the money, Richard. And once the cash flow dried up, so did her loyalty. Richard's attorney whispered urgently in his ear, but Catherine pressed forward. We're proposing the following: full return of all misappropriated funds, an equitable split of remaining marital assets, minus penalties for financial misconduct, spousal support for 5 years, and Jessica retains ownership of the Lake Forest home. Richard scoffed. That's outrageous. What's outrageous? Catherine replied. Is your documented attempt to steal $500,000, hide it through shell accounts, and flee the country with a woman half your age, while leaving your wife of nearly 3 decades with nothing and... Richard opened his mouth, but no words came. You underestimated her, Olivia said from behind me. She'd come to observe, silently sitting along the back wall. Now she stood. You thought she'd roll over, like always, but this time, she fought back. I looked directly at Richard for the first time since the meeting began. You told her I'd always take you back, that I was pathetic. But you're the one who ran. You're the one who begged her to post the photos to hurt me. You thought breaking me would make you feel powerful. You were wrong. Richard's attorney sighed. We'll need time to review these terms. You have until Friday, Catherine said. If we don't receive acceptance by then, we move forward with full litigation, and with Diana's cooperation, we're confident in our position. Richard looked utterly defeated. The man who had once loomed large over my life now sat small and cornered. I rose from my seat. This was never about revenge. It was about the truth. About protecting what I built, what we built, and you tried to steal. As I walked out of the room, I didn't look back. The power had shifted, And this time, it was mine. 3 weeks after the settlement negotiations, the divorce was finalized. Catherine had delivered exactly what she promised: a clean legal break with the strongest possible outcome. Nearly $400,000 of the missing funds were recovered and returned to me through court-ordered restitution, thanks to the combined work of our forensic accountant and Diana's reluctant cooperation. The Lake Forest home was officially mine, and Richard was barred from selling or accessing any remaining marital assets until all debts and claims were settled. For the first time in months, I could finally breathe again. Richard's career didn't survive the scandal. Midwest Financial, the company he'd been with for over 25 years, quietly asked for his resignation just days after the settlement was filed. A company insider later told Catherine's team that HR had reviewed the court documents and the social media evidence. It was enough to determine he posed a reputational risk they couldn't afford. He walked away without a severance package, his professional standing in ruin. As for Diana, she vanished as quickly as she had appeared. Once the assets were frozen and her name began circulating in legal motions, she cut all ties with Richard. She deleted her Instagram, vacated the condo he'd rented for her, and stopped responding to his calls and messages. A mutual acquaintance told me that she'd relocated to Miami and was already dating someone new, a tech entrepreneur with deeper pockets and less legal baggage. Richard tried to reach out to me once, a short email that simply read, "I made a mistake, can we talk?" I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I turned my energy toward rebuilding. The children, Olivia, Thomas, and Zoe, had rallied around me during the worst days, and now they supported me as I started again. Olivia, ever the planner, helped me sort through finances and future budgeting. Thomas built spreadsheets that tracked remaining assets and suggested investment opportunities. Zoe, my emotional compass, simply reminded me every day that I was loved and respected and not alone. Together, we transformed our home into a sanctuary again. The energy shifted. The air felt lighter. I painted the bedroom walls a soft sage green, replaced old linens with fresh textures, and took down every photo that reminded me of the past. I no longer wanted to preserve the illusion of a perfect marriage. I wanted space for truth, healing, and authenticity. The financial settlement was more than just restitution. It was validation. A court recognized what I had endured and granted me the resources to move forward with dignity. I used part of the funds to pay off our remaining debts, invested another portion, and opened a small savings account in my name only, something I hadn't had since my 20s. It felt symbolic, like claiming a piece of myself that had been long buried beneath years of sacrifice. And then, with quiet satisfaction, I took one final step. I applied to finish my law degree. Catherine had encouraged me, even offered me a part-time role as a paralegal at her firm. It wasn't just about education anymore. It was about closure, reclaiming the dream I once set aside for someone who never deserved it. Richard had once said I was paranoid and controlling, but in the end, it wasn't control I sought. It was justice, and I got it. He lost everything by underestimating me. I regained everything by refusing to underestimate myself. 1 year after Richard walked out, I stood at the window of my new lakefront condo, coffee in hand, watching the early morning sun ripple across Lake Michigan. The view was breathtaking, but what filled me most was the quiet peace I felt in my chest, a peace I hadn't known in years. The silence in this home wasn't heavy or hostile like before. It was mine. The divorce had been finalized 6 months earlier. With Catherine's help, I used part of my settlement to purchase the condo, and the rest to fund the next chapter of my life. I had re-enrolled in law school, determined to finish the degree I abandoned decades ago. Catherine brought me on as a part-time paralegal while I studied, offering guidance, mentorship, and encouragement. Working at her firm didn't just give me experience, it gave me purpose. I wasn't the same woman who trembled over spreadsheets at a kitchen table. I was sharper now, more focused. In the courtroom, I watched attorneys advocate for women who'd been financially blindsided just like I had. I saw the familiar expressions of betrayal, confusion, and fear. I saw my old self in them. And then I began mentoring. Women just beginning their legal fights would call Catherine's office, unsure of what to do next. She'd connect them with me. I shared not only resources, but my story, stripped of shame and full of strength. Returning to law school in my 50s wasn't easy. I studied late into the night, attended lectures surrounded by students half my age, and pushed past doubts that crept in when things felt overwhelming. But I never questioned why I was doing it. I was building something real for myself this time, a future on my own terms. My children were my biggest cheerleaders. Olivia sent study tips from Oregon during her medical residency. Thomas reviewed my contracts class notes over Zoom. Zoe spent weekends with me, quizzing me before exams. We had grown stronger as a family through the storm, and now we were celebrating together. Graduation was only weeks away. The law firm where I worked part-time had already offered me a permanent position in their family law division. My mentors believed in me. My kids were proud of me. And for the first time in a very long time, I was proud of myself. I'd lost a marriage, but gained a mission. I had once been a woman who stayed silent out of fear and loyalty. Now, I was a woman who spoke with clarity, who knew her worth, who reclaimed her life, one decision at a time. Richard's betrayal didn't break me. It set me free. In the ashes of our old life, I found something far more valuable than money or reputation. I found myself. My future. My voice. And I would never give either away again. The morning of my graduation, my kitchen buzzed with laughter, coffee brewing, and the sound of my children fussing over last-minute details. Olivia double-iced her menu itinerary, Thomas adjusted my robe collar with surgeon-like precision, and Zoe kept snapping pictures with her phone, documenting every second. For a moment, I simply stood still and watched them, grown, vibrant, and proud. Their support had never wavered. They had carried me through the darkest chapter of my life without hesitation, and now they were here to celebrate my new beginning. I looked down at the law school graduation sash in my hands. It felt heavier than fabric. It carried decades of sacrifice, pain, resilience, and rediscovered purpose. I thought about the version of me who sat at a kitchen table, surrounded by financial ruin and heartbreak. She would never have imagined this day. But I had made it here, step by step, because I chose to fight back